Good morning, everyone. My name is Kohler, and this morning I will be presenting my senior project. The essential question that set my project into motion was, what are the necessary steps to not only improving but also maintaining the volleyball equipment at Millis High School, as well as running a camp for the boys junior varsity volleyball players. Here you can see one of our ball carts, which is missing a wheel and serves as many other examples do as a piece of equipment that has degraded over time. Now, my motivation for this project came from two major things. First would be my time in the program. I have played volleyball at Millis since I was in the 8th grade, and over that time the program has given a lot to me, so I felt that I should be giving something back to that program. In the sense of giving something back, I wanted to make sure I was focused on helping the future generations so that they could come through the program with the best possible experience. This picture is of the varsity team in my freshman year, and I am there on the left wearing number 33. As my essential question suggested, I have two sides to this project, so therefore there were also two goals for this project. The first goal would be acquiring new training equipment. You can see the current ref stand here, which is pretty lackluster and was actually my main focus during this project. That's the piece I wanted to get replaced the most. And the second goal, which was added on at a later date during the project process, which I will get into in a few slides, was running a camp for the junior varsity players over April vacation. So as there were two sides to my project, there were also two sides to my research. The first side for my research was researching the equipment. For this, I used some of my own personal experience playing at both the Millis level and also at the club level, as well as a Google form I sent out to the volleyball players in the school so that they felt that they had an input in how the program was improved. This picture is the results of the Google form. Alongside that Google form, I also sent out a Google slideshow with pictures of each piece of equipment that I referenced in the form, so to avoid any confusion if somebody didn't know what piece of equipment I was using. I also then was researching for the camp. This included looking into things such as what drills you might want to run with newer players, what proper warm-ups look like, and what proper cool-downs look like. Working with a mentor was a huge part of my project for me. My mentor, Ms. Kokias, was absolutely invaluable to me during this process. She made sure I was on top of things, proofread many an email, and actually did come up with the idea for the camp when I noticed I needed a secondary thing for my project. She also made sure that I was preparing the proper forms for my project. You can see one of them here. This is the photo release form I made so that I had permission from each player's parent or guardian to use a picture of them in my presentation. Now, getting approval was the next huge part of my project. I worked with Mr. Grant on this the most. In addition to multiple face-to-face conversations that we had, we also shared at least 17 emails back and forth. And Mr. Grant was actually the person who mentioned the idea of a purchase order, which would allow me to order the equipment I wanted through the school's budget. This is what triggered the necessity for a secondary part of my project because I was no longer going to be fundraising for this project. This email here is the first email I sent to Mr. Grant with the first draft of my purchase order. I also worked quite a bit with Ms. Cleary and Mr. Engler in order to acquire the gym and reserve it for the 3 days I planned to run the camp over April vacation. In addition, I worked with Mr. Glynn, the middle school principal, to get the word out to the middle schoolers about my camp to see if I can get as many participants as possible. When we finalized the purchase order, Mr. Grant and I agreed on 3 pieces of equipment. The setter net, which you can see pictured here, which provides the setter on the team with a proper target to better place the ball during practice, a hitting aid, and a ball cart. Now I will say this picture is not the exact model of the setter net we used. That exact picture was far too blurry to include in the presentation. But on the next slide here, we have the hitting aid on the left and the ball cart on the right, and these are the exact models that we did order. Preparing for the camp was also a big piece of importance for me. The original idea, which is why I was working a lot with Mr. Glynn, the middle school principal, was to run the camp through the middle schoolers that were not yet involved in volleyball to hopefully raise their interest and gain some new players and some new faces in the program. However, due to some advertising issues I faced along the way, nobody responded, so I had to adjust the plan and pivot to working with the junior varsity players. Working on the permission slips, which is something I mentioned earlier, was also a big part, and this is me in the school computer final copies of my presentation, my permission slip packets after Ms. Copius and I worked through some final edits. When the camp time rolled around, the attendance was a lot better than I was expecting. When I pivoted to the junior varsity players, it was on fairly short notice, so I wasn't expecting to get any numbers really, but I had between 6 or 7 people each day, and that allowed me to run certain drills that I had both used during my time at Millis, but also during my time at the club level. I was also able to engage in some one-on-one coaching moments and some coaching moments with the players as a whole. And this picture here is the players warming up on the 3rd day of my camp. In terms of the end product, I think that my goals were certainly reached to a degree, as long as I allow some room for variation. I did run a successful camp. While it wasn't with the original idea I had in mind, it was overall, I think, a pretty fun experience, a beneficial experience, and people showed up, so that really made it worthwhile. And I did order the equipment. I am still awaiting arrival on that equipment. I do have confirmation that it was ordered. I tried to get that picture in here, but I was not able to get a hold of that picture. But we should be seeing that by hopefully the end of next month, I believe. After the completion of the camp and the ordering of the equipment, I was able to spend some time reflecting on my project. And this time I was able to identify some issues that I faced along the way. The first issue would be a lack of response from the donors that I had tried to reach out to. The website that the company I should say, that we did end up ordering from actually had some information on their website that would suggest that they provided donations to certain programs based on user comments and such. So, beginning of my project, I reached out to them. However, they never responded. I did send them a follow-up email, and they still never responded. As I mentioned earlier, there were also some advertising issues. The main thing I worked with Mr. Glynn on was putting blurbs about my project into the middle school newsletter. This is actually the first of 2 blurbs that I had him put in the newsletter. He also ran some things through the morning announcements for the middle school. However, still no one responded. A big part of the project that came out of adding the camp on was trying to make sure that it had some effect in the future. I know that in the town there are certain things that happen annually, such as the gut camp, and I wanted to see if I could make what I had been running in my camp something that happened every April vacation, as well as making it something that happened with the original idea I wanted to use. And I'm currently working with the juniors on the varsity team, as well as my coach, to see how we can make that materialize in the future. Hopefully, maybe I might be able to come back every April vacation and spend some time working with some new players and keep our program going, or else new equipment doesn't really get used if no one's there to use it. During that time of reflection, I also found some lessons I learned. I really learned the importance of emails. I sent and received a lot of emails over this. They were very important and very useful in getting those last-minute communications out and planning things out. And I also learned the stress of looking at an empty inbox while you were expecting many an email. I learned the value of being able to adjust on the fly. And a lot of times during my project, it seemed like my project was going really well, and then it would dip, and then it would go well, and then it would drop down to a hole, and then being able to adjust got me out of that hole. And I also, for the first time, actually read one of the permission slips we get for the field trip. So while editing it to make it my own, this is my own that I use for my camp. You can see certain things about volleyball and such. I got to read all of the legal fluff, for lack of a better term, in there that somehow is one sentence with one semicolon. I'm not quite sure how. So some points of success that I am certainly proud of are being able to make those adjustments on the fly. They really helped my project come out, and I did still get a solid product out of my project. And the turnout of the camp. This picture is after the first day of camp. You can see the 7 players I have here. You have the legend himself, Timmy Kraus, younger brother of Matt Kraus there. And nobody got injured, which was a really big part. I was pretty concerned about that. That would have been really miserable, but nobody got injured, which was really nice. And I think an important thing to be able to do after a project like this is to be able to identify any mistakes you made and where you can improve on projects like this in the future. And the first mistake that I definitely noticed I made was advertising the original camp idea, as I had previously mentioned. My methods for advertisement were not entirely effective. Most of them were tuned mostly to the middle schoolers themselves and not the parents. And I believe if I had gone to the parents, I might have gotten more responses and been able to run the camp with the original idea that I wanted to. Also, I ran into some issues on time management on my own part. I believe if I had gotten started earlier in the year last year or earlier in the year this year, I would have been able to work around the bumps in the road a little bit better. I certainly could not have done this project alone. There are a number of thank yous I'd like to give out. The first 4 people on the list, Mr. Grant, Mr. Engler, Ms. Cleary, and Mr. Glynn, were all vital in making sure I had my equipment ordered, the gym prepared, and the word got out as best as I could. Ms. Kopis, my mentor, I want to thank 10,000 times over. She really made sure that I was getting the help I needed every step of the way. During our mentor meetings, it was very easy to just sit down and have a discussion and not really worry about any questions that I really had to ask. And she really did kind of dig me out of a hole. I want to give a shout out to Thomas Azier and Matt Krause for their help during the camp itself. They were huge in being able to hop in a drill and such. This picture is me getting the ball out of the ventilation from the roof that our freshman Henry put up there, and that was taken by Matt Krause. I also want to thank the JV volleyball team for showing up to my camp, making it worthwhile, and giving their best effort during my camp. And I want to give a special shout out to the janitorial staff at the school for helping make sure the gym floor was clean and usable, not only during my camp, but also during our season. We as a team really appreciate what they do for the program. And this is my work cited. And my final thank you goes out to all of you. Thank you for listening this morning. And at this time, I would like to open it up to any questions.